He's always got to get the first word. Happy Tuesday, folks. It's Major League Trade Deadline Day. So as I said yesterday, it's like one of the few days where there's actually excitement in the summer in terms of sports. I mean, not talking about like individual games because, or the British Open or, whatever, but, just as in terms of
British Open. Where does the British Open come in the lexicon of great things? Come on.
Well, some people like it. I mean, please, people got excited for 5 seconds when Tiger Woods was contending until he started focusing on who he was going to date from some Waffle House next. But anyway, sorry, I just have to go there because I talk about an athlete who just completely destroyed himself. And I that's the thing. Everybody's got this sympathy for Tiger and everybody roots for Tiger. And I never liked Tiger. I was always a Phil Mickelson fan, and I don't root for him now for this great sort of like Renaissance type of story. It's like he destroyed himself, so I have no sympathy for him.
Okay, I mean,
that's part of sports, Mike. That is sports, particularly individual player sports to a T. They love you when you're young. You're the phenom. You come out of nowhere. You get to the sports middle age time. They start turning on you. You have some bad years. You do some crazy things in your personal life. You come back around and you give them a taste of the glory of what they loved you. This story has been written particularly with tennis players for years. And Russ, you'll know this for sure. It's probably happened with baseball players too, because there's a little bit of an individual skill set to the game of baseball that's unique because of the way you bat, the way you do things. But you don't really see it with hockey players as much. You don't really see it with basketball players as much. But in those unique skill sets, particularly the way the sport's designed, where it's a one-person action, you see it. And I don't know, you could probably name off a few baseball players. I can't think of it because I'm not a big baseball guy, but tennis for sure, golf, we've seen it.
Oh yeah.
And there's more.
No question. So one other pre-show thing to talk about. Mike, are you still there? Okay, I thought you froze.
Nope, I'm here.
Okay. James in the chat room is already saying, let's get it going. It's like, slow it down, dude. We warm up into it. This is how we warm up our brains. But the other day, something weird happened online. There was a nugget of a new song that came out from the other faction of Yes, the ARW faction. If you're not a Yes fan, it's Anderson, Rabin, Wakeman, and a few others. And so for some reason, the song got released a little bit, and then it went dead because the name of the song was Fragile. Now, of course, Yes has an album named Fragile.
Right.
And maybe the other side didn't like that they had a song named Fragile. I don't know. But all of a sudden yesterday, it was back out on YouTube in full form. So maybe there was like a one-day disagreement between the two sides. But here's the thing. The song is really good.
Mm-hmm.
Anderson Rabin connection of songwriting and harmonies are excellent. Rick Wakeman's piano play is really solid. And what's funny here is, like, a lot of people will bring up, the Rolling Stones are great. Look, they're 75. They're out there. Yeah, but, any kind of music they've tried to create in the last decade has been horrible, or 2 decades.
I was saying, you're being kind because honestly, it's like, and people think I say this for shock value because of my stance on Springsteen. I've just never been a big Springsteen fan and think, but he was good back in the day, and then I think he just has really devolved into something that's just horrific. The Stones have been terrible for 30 years. For more than 30 years. I think Tattoo You was probably the last good album that they did.
You want a little known fact about Tattoo You? Yeah. Tattoo You was mostly outtakes from other albums that they came back around and polished.
Oh, see, that makes sense.
Right. So they ran out of ideas in 1980. Yeah. So
the one thing about
go listen to Tattoo You. Play it as an entire album front to back. It's wicked. It's really,
it's good.
Really good.
It's good. It's good. I'm not saying it's not. I'm just saying at a certain point they just stopped being creative.
Cousin Eddie disagrees with you and said Steel Wheels was good. But here's the thing. So getting back,
your lip, baby. Yeah, I can sing that one.
getting back to it though. these guys have been writing all along with different things. Like Trevor Rabin's been doing music scores. He's already done over 50. And he actually brings in full orchestras into the studio to do these scores. So that's something that's kept him creative. John Anderson's worked with a lot of different people over the years to keep him creative. These other guys, a lot of times they just take time off and they don't stay with it. And that's the issue. So what I'm saying here is for like Yes's 50th anniversary, the other side, when they came out with an album last year, there was like 2 good songs. Like, honestly, that's all there was. This one I have high hopes for. I actually do.
Well, this is the thing, and then we'll start the show.
And what did you think of the song, Mike?
I thought it was pretty good. I really did.
And you're a tougher critic than me, so
yeah, it exceeded my expectations because I'm always, I'm very hesitant when it comes to like older artists developing something that's not sort of derivative of what they've done in the past, and this was sort of, it was fresher than I expected.
Yeah.
The one thing though is like, and I saw Anderson, Rabin, and Wakeman at the UB Center for the Arts a few years ago, and they were really, really good. And when I saw, and this was after they had been in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, I thought that there was a reunion tour because it's an evening of Yes, and it was like at one of the casinos around here. And then I found out it was the Steve Howe version. I had no interest in seeing it. So it's like, I mean, really, I can't imagine the classic Yes songs being sung by anybody other than John Anderson. So what's the point? Am I really going to go see, and I love the drama album. I'm really going to go see the drama album from song 1 to song 8. No,
nobody's going to do that. All right. Our last thing is Bryce Harper. So
yes.
Is it John Rizzo? Is that his first name?
Yes, I believe so.
So John Rizzo for the Nationals should probably be fired. He probably should have been fired years ago when Steven Strasburg was having his best season and they sat him and they didn't play him in the playoffs. And Davey Johnson sort of went as crazy as he could, who was the manager at the time, because they couldn't use his best pitcher. They get eliminated. They've never really gotten closer to the World Series since. And so now they have their one opportunity to trade Bryce Harper, who will be a UFA next year.
No, this next year.
Yeah, right, next year. Yeah, so next year he's a UFA, and he says he's not going anywhere. And it's like, this is after a day where they said he could be traded. Like, I don't understand what's going on.
What does this sound familiar to? Brooklyn, Barclays Center, certain big. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. It's like it's the same gosh darn thing as Tavares. If you don't have a new deal signed, you trade the guy because he's not going to be held responsible for what he's saying right now before the trade deadline. And there's no way he's going to get through the through waivers before August 31st. So this is your last best opportunity to get a bevy for a guy who there's no guarantee he's going to come. And if he really wants to come back to Washington,
then he'll sign a cheaper deal.
Or they'll pay him what he thinks he's worth in free agency. But I'm saying at least they get that young bevy of talent. And in this instance, they're giving up on the hope that they can sign him, and that's dumb.
Yeah, I just don't get it. And I guess if they don't make the playoffs, or if they somehow do make it and get eliminated again, Rizzo's got to go. That team has a lot of minor league talent. A lot of it hasn't had a chance to even break through yet at the major league level. So that's it. I would just get rid of the guy.
Hello, Hockey World. Today is Tuesday, July 31st, 2018.
I'm Peter Testier in Winnipeg.
I'm Russ Cohen. I was almost going to say North Massapequa. That's where I used to be from. We'll just say Glassboro.
And I'm Michael Agello from Parts Unknown, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. I always say Parts Unknown because of my youth watching wrestling, and I have to say rest in peace to Nikolai Volkov, one of my favorite heels in professional wrestling. Him and the Iron Sheik with that Russia.
What was he really? Was he an Italian guy? What was he really?
I don't know. I'm assuming that was his actual name, but maybe I'm wrong. I mean,
you know what it was? He was Yugoslavian. That's right. Someone told me once.
Okay, so instead of working for Brezhnev or Khrushchev, you work for Marshal Tito. There you go.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll cover a few things today, and we'll take some questions at the end of the show in the chat if you have any questions regarding free agency or trades or whatever. Start with a signing that happened again after we got off the air yesterday, which was Kevin Hayes, and we talked about Kevin Hayes in terms of what he might sign for. And Russ, both of you guys got it pretty close. I think I was a little under 5. I think I said 4.75 for $1 million, and he ended up signing for 5.125.
One of us at one point yesterday said 5.15 for something. I think I did for something. I think Peter did for something. But
I said 5 something.
Yeah, and this is the right move. I know there are some Ranger fans that think he should be part of the long-term team, and I don't think so. I mean, he's a center. He's not a big-time playmaker. I know there's people out there with advanced stats that said a couple of years ago he was like first or second in the league in primary assists. First, let me tell you, there is no difference between a primary assist and a secondary assist. They all have purpose. They all have meaning. They all lead to goals. So I don't care about that stat. Secondly, last year he had 19 assists. Like, there was plenty of opportunity when there was no pressure on that team for him to create, and he didn't. He gets goals. That's great. You know, I could look it up. I think Jan Holovic had 19 goals one year. Not to diminish his 25, but just to say, hey, when you got a one-dimensional guy, you know, you have a one-dimensional guy. Actually, he had 28 goals for the Rangers one year, Jan Holovic. See, there you go. 19 his first year. Okay, that's what I was remembering. So Jan Holovic had 28 goals. Like, was everybody saying, oh, no, you got to keep him? No. And he ended up going to Philly, and he ended up having 10 goals in 31 games there. Like, this is just – it's the same sort of thing, not the same position, so don't hold me to that. But I just think it's the same sort of thing. It's a good move to just get him in there to be the placeholder this year.
Right. Now that's the sort of dilemma here is, you know, he's 1 year away from unrestricted free agency. So now you've signed him. So now he's basically, he's a lame duck. He's a rental. Yeah. And my thought was, and I was telling Russ this before the show, is that you sign Hayes for 1 year. At this point, if you were trading Hayes as an RFA unsigned, I think reasonably what you would get on the trade market would be something like a second round pick, maybe a little higher, but something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so.
If he has a good year and he's a rental and he's capable of playing center and wing and he scores around what he scores this year, I think you get a low first from a contending team. He's a big guy. He's not a tough guy, but he's a big guy, and he can score. I think they lose nothing because they're not a contending team. They're just, you know, it's the cap space it's money, and MSG prints it like MLS and he does. So it really that's meaningless. And if they can get more assets by keeping them for 3/4 of a season and trading them, I think that's a better move.
Well, I think so. And given the unknown about what the Rangers are going to be next year, that plays right into that thing. If he has a great season and you know you're going to have to come back to the table and negotiate again, well, then trading him for something for your future, if the team isn't what it should be, it makes a ton of sense. And you're sort of out of that bind. The other thing is Hayes is going to be, he won't be 27 till next May. Mm-hmm. So, he's not old. And there's still a certain faction of GMs that value size among everything. But if you combine size and goal scoring and not be Milan Lucic, you've got value.
Yeah. You know what it is too? It's like the Rangers have a lot of guys now who could play center and a few who could play center and wing like Hedel. And so like when you start looking at Hayes, it's like, okay, like what is he? Most likely on another team, he's going to be a winger. But like if he's a winger, he's not going to get you 30 goals, and he's not going to get you 60 points. So that's when he just becomes this sort of $5 million, we could get those players almost anywhere kind of player. I mean, you hate to say it, but I think that's where, his market is right now.
Now, I just pulled up, and this was a story today from the Montreal Gazette, Brendan Kelly from the Montreal Gazette regarding Max Pacioretty. And this is Russ, you think the Carlson situation in Ottawa is getting ugly. The general managers in the league know that Mark Bergevin, the GM of the Habs, is desperate to trade Pacioretty. According to this article, it's saying that the marriage basically between Pacioretty and the Canadiens is over with. The whole thing with there was a trade with the LA Kings that got shut down because the Kings wanted an extension signed. And now basically everybody is lowballing the Bergevin when it comes to Pacioretty, but he needs to move him because it's just not. They're not gonna sign him. He doesn't want to sign there. It's over with. But they're going to get pennies on the dollar for him. And it also chronicles what we've talked about on previous webcasts about the reason that he changed from Pat Brisson to Alan Walsh. Brisson played minor league hockey with Bergevin. They're best buddies, and a lot of Brisson clients are Habs players. So there's a relationship, an intertwining relationship there, and that's probably the reason why Pacioretty separated himself from Brisson and went to Walsh. So
but to be fair to Brisson too, I mean, he's got a lot of other clients.
Oh, I agree, and I know that there was
other that he has. It's not just him.
I agreed, and I know that there was talk about the time that this was going down about him being focused on Tavares, and we know that he was for a certain segment. But just getting to the Canadiens here, I mean, we don't expect nobody expects them to be a contending team. I don't think many people expect them to be a playoff team unless Carey Price stands on his head. This situation is like, I mean, this is no win for both sides, I think.
Yeah, here's the thing. When things get ugly in Montreal, they get really ugly because there's the way the press is there. It's all like TMZ sort of reporting. There's always leaks. There's always these stories. Like, we don't hear these stories about the Chicago Blackhawks, right? We just never do. But we always hear these stories about the Montreal Canadiens. And honestly, I think that's part of the problem and why they haven't won a Stanley Cup since 1993. I mean, they just – you wish they could keep things internally. We don't need to know everything that's going on. Right now, it's probably hard to trade Max Pacioretty, so he's going to have to start the season there. It's going to be tense. It'll be like when PK Subban knew his days were numbered. It's just it happens too frequently there, and it's not one person to blame. It's not. It's just the whole place. It's what happens there, and I just sort of like I hear it now, and it's just like, I don't even know what else to say. It's like, Pacioretty's a good player. You go put him on another team, he'll probably score 30 goals this year.
Right.
But right now even if he scores 30 goals, like, it'll be a bad 30 goals, like Alex Galchenyuk's 30 goals were. It's just like, that's the perception.
Yeah, empty calories, basically.
Yeah.
No,
yeah.
but the point being, when there was talk of the trade with the Kings, the talk was Bergevin was holding out for a guy like Velarde. And you're not going to get a former first-round pick who many people think is going to be a very good NHL player for a guy who's – and, this is not a slam against Pacioretty. He's a consistent 30-goal scorer. He's been great in Montreal. I think he's not over the hill at all. I think he's going to continue to be that player for at least a few years. But in the situation, Peter, where he's a rental, he's a pure rental, and he's not going to sign anywhere. And according to it sounds like he wants to be a free agent next summer and find out and choose where he wants to go. The price that you can demand for a rental, it's just so much, and most teams are not going to go over that.
No, and that's the reality of it. I think a lot of times when there's a trade in this, when you have a player who's in UFA, you try to put in a position where you get them to a team that, one, he doesn't come back and bite you in the butt, but also that he delivers a little bit more fair value, and you have to work with the team, the acquiring team and the agent to say, are you open to this? Is there something there? And that's not uncommon,
Right.
But it's hard to do sometimes depending on the player. And if a player is hell-bent on saying, this is my shot to cash in, maybe they know it's a thin class like it was this year. Next thing you know, they're going to do that, and you're not going to get the return. You're absolutely right, Mike. You don't.
Well, Russ, and this is the situation in a couple different places. And Peter, first, Tyler Myers. I mean, after Trouba signed his deal, and Trouba's making over $5 million, and Myers is making 5.5 in the final year of his deal. I mean, is the sense in Winnipeg that Myers is going to stay the whole year, or are they going to move him before, or are they going to try to extend him? What is the sense there?
There is no sense.
Okay.
There is no understanding. I just put up a blog this morning on Hockey Buzz talking about how the Jets' next big issue is Morrissey. And part of this is I use the premise that assuming Jacob Trouba is leaving, and I think that's a safe assumption based on the way things are going. I think we can say you're leaning to 75 to 80% that relationship is going to come to an end during this season or in the off season, one way or another. Josh Morrissey is your number one left defenseman. Who do you put to play with him? So you either somehow magically find another number one defenseman via trade, right D defenseman, and replace Trouba, which I think is unlikely.
That's unlikely.
It's unlikely. So then you go, well, what's next? Well, Tyler Myers comes up off his deal after next season. And Myers and Morrissey played about 350 minutes with each other last season at even strength, and they didn't do too badly. They were pushing the puck in the right end of the ice. They weren't fantastic in their own end, but it wasn't a train wreck as someone should expect. And you have to wonder, maybe that's plan B. You move Myers up and you re-sign him at probably a little more than what he's making AAV now, hopefully. But if your plan is to move him up and convince him to stay, and you're saying, well, now you're the number one right D on this team, you're going to have to pay him number one right D top pairing salary. And now the question becomes, do you want to do that for Tyler Myers? So I think that there's a big bit of unknown with the Jets and Tyler Myers right now. And a lot of that depends on what we've talked about last season, and we're going to talk about all this season, right, is what happens with Jacob Trouba. Because if they go and if he leaves and there's no return that can fill that spot, Tyler Myers is your next guy who probably plays number one right D with Morrissey, and Bufflin moves back and stays in the second pairing.
Well, I was going to say, what after after Enstrom left, their left side is their weak side, correct? Because you have Trouba, Myers, and Bufflin on the right side. What's on the left side? Morrissey, Morrow, Sherratt, and Sami Niku, who, well, I mean, Sami Niku was named the AHL Defenseman of the Year. Oh no, I wasn't saying that. I'm just
that's your left side.
Peter, I keep going back to the two teams that we cover and how perfect a deal between them. One team is so weak on the right side. One team is so weak on the left side. You've got two expiring contracts. I know that the Leafs have that Kyle Dubas talked to Jake Gardner's agent at the NHL draft. I believe his agent is Pat Brisson. And there has not the story hasn't moved since then. I mean, a Myers for Gardner would make total sense, even if both players are intending to go to free agency, because it helps both teams in the short term balance out their blue line. So, I mean, if we could take over as general managers, I think that would be the first deal that we would make.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so much logical sense to this. And that's what's sort of hard to understand is why isn't something working? And obviously, why isn't something happening? And there's obviously clearly something we're missing in terms of the bigger picture. Yeah. But it solves problems for both teams. Sure. And frankly, it solves problems particularly for the Leafs in an aspect that if that location in that area is a jive for Trouba and his family based on geographic proximity to home in Michigan and stuff.
Sure.
There may not be the same level of salary hit that comes with playing in Winnipeg either.
Right, but what hasn't happened already? That's the thing. It sounds very easy, but it hasn't happened. So there's something holding it up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in the perfect world of, Gardner plus for Trouba, I mean, the thing is that maybe Shoveldayoff doesn't like Gardner, doesn't like the type of defenseman he is. Maybe they think that Gardner is going to ask for probably close to what Trouba. I mean, remember, Gardner could have a 50-point season this year, and
Right.
that means 42, 52, and 50 plus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, based
That's
on
6 million.
that's
Then
it, easily 6 million. Now, if it's
Those are Sandus Ojlis numbers, and he plays just like them.
now the one benefit here, and I've always, because I've thought about this a lot, and obviously during the summer, when you theorize about things, you write them because there's not something else going on. Gardner's from Minnesota. Minnesota is a hop, skip, and a jump from Winnipeg. It's not. What is it? A 3-hour, 4-hour drive or a short flight? I mean, it's not.
Yeah, I mean, you know, like exactly. I mean, if you look at the history of the Winnipeg Jets as they've come from Atlanta, they have held on to a lot of northern U.S. kids.
Yes.
Wheeler, Bufflin, Stewart were all guys from Minnesota. You've got Tucker Poolman, who's from North Dakota. You've got, I mean, Trouba's a northeastern or a northern U.S. kid. Who else? There's more. I'm trying to think of who else. Kyle Connor, I believe, is too.
Yeah, Connor's. Yeah, he's from the area.
Yeah. And there's a few others in the prospect pipe, if I recall. So yeah, you know, they play to that wheelhouse. That this area is not super foreign to you.
I do have breaking news.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Reported on TSN's Twitter feed. Gary Bettman says the league wants a cut of gambling profits if it's intellectual property, data, or video from games are used. Like that, you know, is an interesting subject now, because I'm trying to think, in what way would that happen? Would a casino sort of flash up on the game the odds, like just before the game, like in Game Center? Would they, you know, when they're showing it? Like, I'm trying to think when that would occur. And maybe that's what would happen, is maybe they show the weekly highlights and they say, well, this game is going to be running at 4-1 tomorrow, and this game, you know, like if they're previewing on NHL Network.
I don't think the NHL would put odds on their.
No, they're not going to do it.
Right.
But I'm saying, would a casino
Yes.
grab the footage and do that with like their own people and pay the rights fee?
Exactly. It's the rights fee
saying.
to the NHL to integrate that in with them.
Right.
Now,
Oh my goodness. And you know what? This is a very interesting thing if this really goes through in a capacity that they're talking with the NBA and stuff, because think of all the prop bets, start of the second, you know, all these different things that could happen live.
Right.
I mean, there's a treasure trove of money to be made.
But here's the question though: is this hockey related revenue? Because if it is,
always a troublemaker, Mike.
Always. Well, no, I mean, because you know that the PA is going to say, "Where the hell's my piece of the pie?"
No, they're going to have to get a cut too. They will.
Yeah. So I mean, it's not going to be pure profit on the part of the owners. I mean,
the profit is profit. It's just where is the profit allocated to in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is, take that a step further, and I think it's a really good point, Mike. You introduce this to the players, say, well, we're going to bring you in more revenue. What's the give back from them? Remember, the players don't control the revenue coming in.
Right.
The league does. Right. So the league puts this initiative, said, guess what, guys? Our basic pro forma numbers say we expect a $50 million increase in revenue from this. I'm just throwing numbers in the air. Sure. I have no idea what it would be.
Right.
You know, 25 of that's going to go back to you guys.
And what that would
what's that worth to you in a concession that we want over here?
Well, what it's worth to them is less escrow, because it's that $25 million in additional profit. That means $25 million that doesn't have to go to escrow to the league to balance out the current CBA. I mean, we know that escrow is going to be a big stumbling block when it comes to. And remember, I can't remember if it was Kevin or somebody else said, well, that's part of any hard cap. It's part of any kind of hockey related revenue. When it's a balancing act, you have to have escrow to make sure things balance out at the end of the year, because you don't know where the profits are going to go. But that is a sticking point for the players. They hate having to hold 15-20% of their salary in reserve till the end of the year, until the bean counters count things, and then find out, oh, do I get it or do I not get it? So
it's a huge thing. But how do you keep both sides honest? That's the crux of what escrow does, is it keeps both sides honest. And as long as they can agree on how escrow works in terms of the amount taken, the amount held back, they're accurate on their numbers, and the NHL allows a proper audit done from the player side, it's the only way to keep them honest. I don't know how you get rid of escrow.
Right.
You may want to change escrow a little bit, but I don't know how you can get rid of it.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to get, if I had a mortgage, I would love to get rid of escrow, but somebody's got to pay the taxes and insurance, and what the hell is that's what escrow is for. So,
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on here. Now, I saw that today was the 32nd birthday. I was struck by this, the 32nd birthday of Genny Malkin. So it's like, I know I'm old, so I remember when he was a rookie, and so I'm sure both
a card or anything like.
No, I did not. I was going to send him some.
Really, I thought I asked you to send him a card from the show.
I shirked my responsibility. What can I tell you? But that fact, and the fact that Sidney Crosby, whose birthday is next week, he's turning 31. You start to have to think. I mean, has the window for the Pittsburgh Penguins passed? You're talking about Malkin's 32, Crosby's 31. I think Kessel turns 30. Now they do have young players, the Gensels and the Matt Murrays. Letang is, I believe he's close to 30 or over 30, and he's had a slew of injury problems. And, this is a team that they went to the second round. They lost to the eventual Stanley Cup champion, so there's no disgrace in that after winning 2 cups in a row. But the question is it over for them, or how much of a window is still left for them?
No, it's not over for them. I mean, I expect Malkin to be that kind of player that can play really well right up until the age of like 37, 38. He's very unusual. Even for a big guy, he skates well. He does get nicked up each year, but when he comes back, even if he's a little hampered, he's still better than most guys on the ice. He's very durable. If you think about it, like he may have missed some games, but he still played 784 games in 1, 2, 3, 6, 9, like 12 years. So he's still averaging 70 games a year or something. Yeah. So that's, you look at that and you say, okay, yeah, he's averaging 61 games a year. It's still pretty good.
Because he had 98 points last year.
Yeah, and one of them was the year they started late, right? The lockout. So that's still pretty good. You look at his goals, he's got 370 goals, 930 points. He's going to get 1,000 points this year. He's still one of the great players. Crosby's still one of the great players. They have young goaltending. They will be around for a while. But it's interesting with Malkin because I think I did the first article on him, maybe even in North America, but I definitely did on NHL.com because I did a prospect preview on Malkin for the World Juniors. And it was really interesting because at that time, you knew he was going to be great, but you didn't know would he be an all-time great. Like, that's so hard to predict. And I probably didn't want to go out on a limb when I wrote that article and say, yeah, he's going to be, a surefire Hall of Famer, all-time great, one of the great Russian players ever. But that's what he's going to be.
Peter, what do you think? Do you think the window is closed or is closing, or how much time do you think this team has?
Sorry, I had to look at some of my screen. Which team?
The Penguins. The Penguins.
I think it's closing. I think it's. I mean, they've got 3 lines anchored by Malkin, Kessel, and Crosby. You can do a lot with that. You still can.
Sure.
But how you expedite fixing the problems that come up each year that's where they're running out of time. You can't. You keep signing other deals. You got to cut. It's just. Your wedge of how to, like, your opportunity to fix the little problems, to keep tweaking with those anchor guys, that's what's holding them back. And you have to wonder, like, is the next move to reset with one of those 3? And it won't be Crosby.
Right. Well, here's breaking news. This upcoming season, there'll be bobbleheads featuring Crosby, Malkin, and Letang. So clearly they're not going anywhere this year. Most of the time when teams do that, they don't intend on trading a guy.
Okay, here's a team in the West, and it's not going to be surprising, but I'll just illustrate this for you guys and for the people watching. Their top 3 highest paid forwards are 30, 35, 33 and 33. Their top paid defenseman is 28, and he just signed a 8-year, $88 million extension. Their number 2 and 3 defensemen are 33 and 31, and their 4th defenseman is 29, and their starting goaltenders are 30. Their starting goaltender is 32, and their backup is 35. That is the LA Kings, ladies and gentlemen. And I don't think it's going out on a limb to say I think the window maybe is closed on them, even though I think Kopitar is still great, and I think Doughty is one of the best defensemen in the league, and Quick seems to be, still able-bodied. But I don't know. I mean, you can count on 2 hands the number of 30-year-olds who are still, or 30-plus-year-olds who are still really good.
You know what that reminds me of? Like, I think they're going to end up being like the California Angels team that had all those guys,
Carew and Baylor and Reggie,
and they were all aging, but they still had one more run on them, and the Kings could still have one more run on them the same way those guys did, because those guys hung around together too, and they eventually got eliminated. The Angels didn't win the World Series, clearly, but that year anyhow.
So you think that summers on Manhattan Beach will keep them young and vital and whatever? And
it'll eventually make your skin like leather, but for playing sake, yes.
It didn't make Joffrey Lupul vital, but never mind. Okay, I wrote something today based on the fact that today is the Major League Baseball trade deadline, and one of my bones of contention over the last few years has been that the NHL trade deadline has sucked. It really has been terrible, and it's not. I think that the league has tried to do things to sort of remedy that or make it easier for teams to make moves, but with the escalation of long-term contracts and with the teams up against the cap, there are a few mechanisms like putting players on long-term injury or retaining salary that help make moves possible, but it's still not enough. And the teams that want to spend can't, and the teams that don't want to spend don't want to take on salary. So everything is limited. And I spitballed a couple ideas, and I talked to Russ about it before the show. And the one of them, I think, it has precedent in another sport, namely baseball. And in baseball, you've seen a team like the Yankees. They traded a relief pitcher yesterday for room under there's a signing bonus limitation for players, international players. And they traded a player for basically cap space on this international signing bonus pool. So they traded a player. The team who they traded him to got a relief pitcher who's good, and the Yankees got cap space to spend on some 16 or 17-year-old.
Actually, it's more than that. The Yankees are actually targeting the number 1 guy.
Yes.
So they even though they're the New York Yankees, they just don't automatically have the most money with international funds. Right. So that's why they've had to acquire from other teams, but they're going after the number 1 guy out there. So
right, and that's the thing. It's like, I mean, I say, like, and obviously none of these changes could happen until a new CBA is negotiated, and that doesn't happen until 2022. But Peter, if they're moving around players like Chris Pronger and Dave Boland, and they're playing those sort of shell games like Arizona has done the last few years, then trading cap space is sort of just the next step. And I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think that the haves and the have-nots both benefit from it.
I've long been a proponent of trading cap space, or buying cap space is a better way of looking at it. So if you come, I've always said, like, okay, you come to the trade deadline, the team has $2 million in cap space, but they can buy cap space for the rest of that season. They can do it. So what's cap space worth? So say you go and you look at, you go and talk to a team that has $8 million in cap space. I need $4 million. What's the cost? Is it dollar for dollar? Is it 50 cents on the dollar? What? And then, that team has to look at it and go, well, maybe they can get 75 cents on the dollar, or $1.05 compared to another team from another team. Like, how desperate is that other team to get the cap space? And I think that's hockey related revenue. Right. But I think also that's a very one-sided way of how this is going to work, because I don't think you'll see a lot of teams buying cap space, I think you'll only see the rich teams doing it. But
I
if it
don't
keeps
know. I mean,
but if it keeps the rich teams spending to the cap so they can buy more, is that a bad thing? And I'm not sure.
No,
I don't know what the answer is to that.
But here's the thing, though. This definitely was my number one answer when asked about it too, because I like the idea of trading cap space. I think even if you're a team that's out of it, you still might be trading cap space to get a key prospect that you couldn't get before, or you couldn't get in the last draft, or whatever. And I think so whether it's with a rich team or even a middle team that is just, hoping that they can get that last spot, it doesn't matter to me.
Right. I mean, it's not one-sided. A team like New Jersey, who has $15-16 million in cap space and probably is not going to use it.
Yeah.
I mean, they benefit if, say, all of a sudden, the Maple Leafs want $5 million in cap space. They could trade for that. The Devils would get, a draft pick or a prospect or something that would be positive and beneficial to them, and the Leafs would get their cap space. The players wouldn't complain because their players are getting paid. So I don't see that the PA would have a problem with it. It's simply it's a sort of an end around on the hard salary cap, and that's where I think that the league would have a problem with it. But I don't think it's beneficial to stop the big teams, the teams that have money, to spend money. It's like, I don't see a negative in it. I don't
see a negative either. Matt is asking our thoughts on luxury tax. Here's my thought. It is just for the rich, and the poor teams just pocket it, and they never put it back into their franchise.
Yeah,
right.
That's bad about the luxury tax.
Right, and remember the Canadian Assistance Fund back in the day. The rich teams paid into it, and the teams that had needed help got it. And they used it to survive. But if there was a luxury tax, then it would basically be the same thing. But in Major League Baseball, you see, very few instances where teams like Kansas City, they actually used that money to build up a team to be a championship team, and then they stripped it down after they got to a couple World Series, and now they're spending next to nothing, and they're the worst team in baseball. So now my other idea, and I've heard this expressed before, and it has its problems, but an exemption, what I call the Butch Goring exemption. Basically, if a team trades for a unrestricted free agent, an expiring contract, that the salary, now if like Toronto trades for Erik Karlsson, Toronto's responsible for Erik Karlsson's salary for the rest of the year, but the cap hit is not, there is no cap hit. Basically, they trade for a guy, and you're allowed to trade for a guy in one player per team, that there's an exemption for the salary. So it allows them to fit that player, because they wouldn't have to make moves to fit a player because there's an exemption. I think that's a good compromise, but I think probably a lot of teams would have problems with it. Thoughts?
Yeah. No, I think there's an interesting aspect to that. You're trading a player, you get the exemption for the remaining salary cap on that, so you can acquire them. It's just saying it doesn't apply.
Right.
How many times? Once?
One.
Twice?
Yeah, I guess
one player.
You do it.
One player.
One player.
So for instance, if you take the Winnipeg Jets, you acquire Paul Stastny, but you don't get his cap hit. Right then, you could take what you did and maybe get another player too, right? Yes. Like it just sort of gives you an extra add.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if there's a bad thing about that. And the gamble, again, is what are those costs? What are the players' costs? So teams that do right. So the risk, the holistic risk across the league is, if you're going to play that game, does it drive the price up because it doesn't apply to your cap hit? Yes. So now you're going to have to really weigh that balance.
That was the thing. It says you use the Stastny trade as an example. Yeah. If you in that deal, I believe St. Louis had to retain 50% of the salary.
They retained 50%,
and they got a first-round pick in Foley. Okay, so in that instance, they don't have to retain 50%.
Yeah.
So it's more cost-effective for them. They can if with this waiver, they can generate a market for a $7.5 million player, even from teams that don't have $7.5 million in cap space, which increases the return for the Blues. So I think it's a good for the haves and the have-nots.
So what if you expand this and say, let's try, because one of the things I think we all agree on is we want to see more ability for deals to be made, for GMs to go and try and change the direction of their team, and the salary cap and some of the contracts because of the salary cap they've squeezed that great thing where you could see these great 3-player trades and stuff like that. They've just squeezed it out to almost nothing, but it's still a really critical point of the fan experience in hockey. So what if you had a player on a 2-year deal? Would it be an option to make the person allowed, or the acquiring team allowed, you get an exemption for that year? Come the next year, you got to figure it out. Like, so you don't get hit now, but by start a training camp, that you've got to find out where your cap space is to keep that player or trade them again.
Well,
I think the more the league and the NHLPA can do to understand the value proposition of this in hockey for the fan experience, it makes it a better game for people and for teams, because right now it just doesn't seem, I don't want to use the term equitable. It's not inequitable. It's just not, maybe I'm nostalgic. It's not what it was.
Yeah.
And that was something that kept fans engaged in hockey.
Well, here's one thing that I think has had a chilling effect on some potential trades. And I know, like, for example, I'll use the Phil Kessel deal. Kessel had, I think, 7 years left in his contract when the Leafs traded him a few years ago. And they had to retain, I think it was 15% of the salary, which was $1.2 million on an 8-year deal. You have to retain the same amount per year for the length of the contract if you're doing salary retention. Mm-hmm. There are some deals that could be made, but even with long-term players where that probably got squelched because a team doesn't want to retain 50% of the salary for the length of the deal. If they could do where they could retain 50% of the salary for 1 year and then it goes to that other team, it probably opens up some flexibility. And I don't understand why it has to be throughout the deal. Why it can't be, at least for the first year, some flexibility, and then that team takes on more or takes on less. You know what I'm saying? I think that would add some, because we know the capologists can work their magic, and that's what they do. And I think that would provide a little more flexibility. So,
yeah.
All right. Go ahead, Russ. Sorry.
No, I think there's something to that. I agree.
Let's take a couple questions before we end the show. You got any in the chat?
All right, let me check. I warned them, so let's see. All right. Do the Rangers have cap concerns this year? And this was asked by Cousin Eddie. They're squeezing it out. Like, they do have like just under $10 million for a couple of guys. Spooner's going to get almost $5 million himself. He'll get just under that. So they're getting close. So they're not quite there, but yeah, it's getting a little tight even for them.
Let me just, this is not breaking news, but in the wake of the Chuck Caton situation in Carolina, which I still think is just balderdash. It's just stupid. Yep. A source here who I follow, YYZ Sports Media, a guy who has a good pulse on the Toronto media scene, said that Joe Bowen, who's going to be inducted in the Hall of Fame this year, and Jim Ralph, who's his color commentator, who's great, very entertaining guys, great guys. I've gotten to know them over the last few years. That they have signed 5-year extensions to be the play-by-play and color commentator for the Leafs on the radio. So that, if there was any.
Good to see radio work somewhere.
Yeah, it does. No slagging the TV broadcasters who cover the Leafs for TSN and Sportsnet. Right. But as somebody who's followed the Leafs for most of my life and listened to Joe Bowen since the early '80s, he's great. He's very entertaining, and he gets into it, and it's great to I love Dennis Bayak, and he was the only one who because he does the Jets broadcast for TSN. Dennis Bayak was the only guy that I really gravitated towards who did radio when Joe Bowen was doing TV. So, he's the voice of the Leaf fan, and the Leaf fans love him. So it's great that he'll be back for 5 years.
That's good. That's good news. And it's good for radio. All right. So Matt asks us if Pacioretty wanted to be in Florida, who would be the likely target? Would it be one of the young defensemen like Matheson, Pisak to try and fill the void of Sagacek by committee? It wouldn't be Matheson. Like, he's an untouchable. They love him there. Dale Talon will not trade that kid.
Based on this report, it sounds like it wouldn't be anybody like that. It's not going to be Borgstrom. It's not going to be Bukestad. It's not going to be Trocheck. I mean, their teams are offering the rental 1 year price, and none of those guys are consistent with a rental 1 year price.
No, I mean, I'm trying to think.
Owen Tippett. I mean, are they going to give up Owen Tippett for Pacioretty? No. I think they'd give up their 2019 first and maybe a lower prospect. I think that's about all you'd get.
Yeah, I'm going to try and at least give you a name. I'm not coming up with one off the top of my head. So here, all right. So you might be able to get someone like Max Gildon, who is currently playing in the
AHL.
No, in the scrimmages up in Kamloops.
Okay.
For the World Juniors, you might be able to get someone like him who can be a really good defenseman in 3 years.
Right, but you're talking about a long range prospect and probably a draft pick. You're not talking about somebody who can step into the Habs lineup right away. Okay.
Nope, I don't think so either. So let's see who else. Let's see. These guys yap up a storm. It's hard to.
Yeah, I know. That's the one bad thing about the Yahoo chat room. It's like you have to physically go back and pull it down to pull questions up.
Well, Matt also brought up an interesting thing when we talked about the gambling aspect. Does this mean speak to Arizona possibly moving to a casino-based arena? I mean, I guess that's possible. I mean, I don't know if it would be in Arizona. It could be somewhere else.
Wasn't Gila River? Wasn't that because that was one of the previous names? Wasn't that like a casino? I think it was a casino.
It was a casino. That was the West Virginia one that the Penguins were going to move to, right?
No. That was the name. Remember, it's been like the jobbing.com. It's been.
Oh yeah. Yes, that was. But I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Back in the day when the Penguins, when they were teetering, they were being considered moved to West Virginia, and that guy was a casino owner. Now, it's funny because if it were today, they'd probably do it.
Maybe.
But hold on, let's see if there's anything else.
Yeah, one more question.
One more question because Mike wants to leave. All right.
I have to go. I have to cover some. I'm covering some baseball today. Hey,
there you go.
Vladimir Guerrero Jr.'s AAA debut in Buffalo. Buffalo, where everything happens.
Well, that's good. You want to be in a happening place.
Sure.
All right. The last question.
Yeah.
I'll answer it. I don't remember who asked it. Will Malkin ever be better than Sidney Crosby? I don't think so, but I think we'll look at it and it'll be somewhat close. But no, I don't think so.
Answer this, Peter. I think that Crosby is Crosby, and he's going to be considered an all-time great.
Yeah.
But like Messier's presence sort of undermined Gretzky in a sense. Remember, Gretzky never won a Stanley Cup after Edmonton and without Messier as his number 2. He got to a final, but he got there because Kerry Fraser blew a call. But Messier went on to win Stanley Cups after Gretzky. With Crosby, it's like it's always going to be that 1-2. You could never put whenever you put that top checker against Crosby, Malkin was there to pay.
Right.
And
last one because this is a pretty good question from Slash.
Right.
Chances of the Sharks being able to land Artemi Panarin. If I had to put a percentage on it, I would give him like 40%. because I think they're starting to run low on assets that they feel like they'd be willing to trade to get a player like that, to mortgage it to try and win it all.
Yeah. The Sharks needed to acquire a Tavares without giving up anything. That's what made Tavares so appealing to them.
Right.
I think, in regards to Panarin, I think we're all going to be really surprised at the ending of this. I just don't think it's going to be a logical ending in here, and something weird's going to happen. And I that's just how it just strikes me as an odd situation.
Well,
and that a weird team comes out of nowhere for him, and it doesn't really, doesn't mean it doesn't make sense, but we just don't really.
An M. Night Shyamalan movie like that.
And all of a sudden Bruce Willis pops up.
Yeah.
He trades Panarin.
Yeah. Cameo team shows up. I don't know. It's just going to be different. I don't know. That's just how I see it.
Samuel L. Jackson rolls in a wheelchair. Mr. Glass. No. No, let's just say this, because Elliot Friedman floated it a couple weeks ago about Toronto, and to me it was like, okay, how does this happen? Because I don't see a logical way of it happening. The only way that it happens is if Columbus is comfortable with taking a 1-year rental price for Panarin. And I don't know, I know if Ack was on here, he'd argue the point, and he'd probably argue too, he's blue in the face. But it's like, I don't know how much the Blue Jackets value one good season with Bobrovsky and Panarin and making the playoffs and making a run, because I still don't think they're a legitimate Stanley Cup contender. I don't think they have enough. But anything is possible. So, it depends on what they value that 1 year to be. And if they say, okay, well, we got to get what we can get, then maybe something happens before the season where they get a first-round pick and a top prospect, and there you go. But I don't know. I think it's a deadline move, if anything.
Yeah, I think it is a deadline move. I agree. If it happens, that's the way it's going to happen.
Yeah, and if they're in the top of the Metro Division, then they keep them and they just say, okay, we're going to lose them. So, but at least, and if they're in third or fourth place and fighting for a playoff spot, then they're going to say, they're going to do what Rizzo from the Washington Senators or Washington Nationals, excuse me. I'm thinking of 1924 Washington Senators.
No, you don't know. Ted Williams, when he was the manager, was like the '68 Senators. That's fair.
There you go. Okay, we got to go, guys. For Peter Tessier, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thanks for watching, and remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.